Oh, hi, come in. Hi, nice to see you. Golly, this place is getting even more chaotic. I've got so many books out and things that are going. At some point I need to have a proper clear up, but things are happening so thick and fast. Anyway, I was so all these instruments in this corner. There's the harp, which I need to tune, and the guitar. But I was trying to sort things out in this corner, and I realised here's my good old Rainstick, which I have often travelled with. In fact, I've sometimes had people at customs try and security in airports try and take it off me because they think it's a weapon, Anyway, I have it for the reason that, I love Rainsticks, but also I quite often talk about a wonderful Seamus Heaney poem, which is really seminal poem for me, which is called The Rainstick. And I thought, since we had Yeats the other day, we might have his great compatriot and successor, Seamus Heaney. So do you want to come and sit down, and I'll The Rainstick was the opening poem in a volume which I've got individually somewhere but can't lay my hands on. A lot of the poetry is still in the garage. The volume came out in '95 and it was called The Spirit Level. But the opening poem is called The Rainstick. And I remember I first read it, I didn't actually know what a rainstick was. I could get a feeling of it from the poem, but then shortly after I bought the book, I was in church, and there was a worship group playing in this particular church that I was in. They're playing a rather beautiful, melodious song, very suggestive of flowing water. And suddenly, in the middle of the song, at some point, the percussionist picked up a rainstick and upended it, and got that wonderful sound. Where you get this wonderful sound of rain. And I suddenly thought, oh golly, upend the rainstick, and what happens next is a music you never would have known to listen for in a cactus stalk downpour sluice rush. I suddenly thought of the Heaney poem. So I went back to it, and of course when I went back to the Heaney poem, it really kind of opened it up for me. So I just thought it'd be fun to read you the poem. I probably don't need to look at the page, but this is that lovely volume I showed you of Opened Ground, the collection which Heaney himself signed for me and kindly wrote to Malcolm with high regard, walk on air against your better judgment. So even though I've got the individual book it was from, it's always a pleasure to take this book up. And the poem begins with this, this clear word to us, an invitation to do something. Upend the rainstick. This is what you should be doing. So I'll tell you what, I'll do just what Heaney says. I'll read those opening words, upend the rainstick, and then I'll read you the rest of the poem. And he occasionally says again, and we'll do it again just for fun of it. So it says sort of, here we go. The rainstick. Upend the rainstick. And what happens next is a music you never would have known to listen for. In a cactus stalk, downpour, sluice rush, spillage and backwash come flowing through. You stand there like a pipe being played by water. You shake it again lightly, and diminuendo runs through all its scales like a gutter, stopping, trickling. And now, here comes a sprinkle of drops out of the freshened leaves, then subtle little wets off grass and daisies, then glitter drizzle, almost breaths of air. Upend the stick again. What happens next is undiminished for having happened once, twice, 10, 1,000 times before. Who cares if all the music that transpires is the fall of grit or dry seeds through a cactus? You are like a rich man entering heaven through the ear of a raindrop. Listen, now, again. He says again, so I'll do it again just for fun. So, wonderful. Oh, so I think that's just a magical poem. I mean, it's simply beautiful in itself. It's very beautifully laid out. If you look at it on the page, it's kind of in tercets, in rhymes of three, and it's got the it's just, he does one of the lovely things that you can do as a poet, where as a poet you've not only got a sentence but also the line to work with. So there's a little pause, and so if you think upend the rainstick and what the sentence goes, upend the rainstick and what happens next is a music you never would have known to listen for. That's the sentence. But the way the lines go, upend the rainstick and what happens next? What happens next is pause. And then the meaning flows on, rather like water flowing over, is a music you never would have known to listen for, but an unknown music. And then the line, that's the end of the sentence, to listen for, but the line can go, and music you never would have known to listen for in a cactus stalk. And then we start in again, in a cactus stalk, downpour, sluice rush. But it's just beautiful the way it is. So I guess the first thing, that attracted me to this poem, and that would attract anyone, I think, is the sheer refreshing abundance and variety of the slushing, kind of whooshing, falling water sound, this sort of downpour, sluice rush, spillage and backwash come flowing through, and all the different kinds of rain. So you've got the big downpour, and then you've got the sort of gutter stopping trickling, and then you've got the sprinkle of drops out of the freshened leaves, and then the subtle little wets of grass and daisies, and then the glitter drizzle. It's all different kinds of rain, isn't it? I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, I suppose you might reasonably say, well, if you're an Irish poet and you can't do rain, you're in trouble, that's what you've got to write about. But actually, Heaney does it all so beautifully and in such lucid and celebratory verse. And so you get all that lovely sense of all the refreshing water, and for a while that's what you get in the poem. And then, of course, you suddenly realise there's a paradox going on here, because it's not just any refreshment. It's an unexpected and beautiful release of refreshment from the last place you'd expected. What happens next is a music you never would have known to listen for in a cactus stalk. Downpour, sluice rush, spillage and backwash come flowing through. So actually, you think about it, this, if you didn't know this was a rainstick, right? If you just saw this, leaning up somewhere, you would think it's a dry, desiccate, unpromising, scaly, arid-looking thing. And it's just an old cactus stalk full of grit and dry seeds. And yet, all you've got to do is turn it upside down, and this amazing sound comes out of it. And of course, that's the other thing. It's not just a celebration of refreshment, it's refreshment from the dry. And the whole thing starts with this great verb, upend. And it's about the upending, the turning upside down of our expectations, and the possibility that this refreshment can come when we least expect it, out of the most unpromising place. And insofar as the poem builds for us a picture or an image of our mind, as all poetry does, which becomes a resonant emblem or a symbol and strikes a kind of music in us, the upending of the rainstick becomes an emblem of all the places and times and opportunities in life when we seem to have just reached the driest, most difficult, barren point, and the problem is a problem and we don't know how to solve it. And somehow we can turn it upside down. Somehow we can turn it upside down and release from it unexpected music, unexpected refreshment and grace. And of course, in my own life, and particularly my life as a Christian, I think about that a lot. I think about how Jesus did that all the time. The Beatitudes are a series of upendings. Blessed, are those who mourn, that they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor. Blessed, all the very people that you think aren't blessed at all. Jesus turns it upside down, and something beautiful flows out of it, as he does, taking the worst thing that we could do to him when we crucified him and turning it into the best thing. And of course, there's this wonderful allusion, a gentle allusion, at the end about, you're like a rich man entering heaven, that Jesus has said how hard for a rich man to enter heaven, and he said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And they said, oh, who can be saved? And then he said, well, all things are possible with God. That there's an offer of the possibility of entering heaven, and that's part of Do you remember the bit where he says, diminuendo runs through all its scales like a gutter stopping trickling? There's a kind of diminuendo in the description of the rain, from the big downpour, sluice rush, spillage, backwash, then to the freshened leaves and the grass and daisies, and it finally all comes down to this one little drop, the ear of a raindrop. And yet if you were to look at just one tiny round little drop and really look at it, you'd see everything. You see everything, the whole cope of heaven reflected. You see yourself tiny in there. And Heaney offers this magical moment where contemplating the raindrop becomes an open doorway into heaven. Perhaps he was thinking about William Blake's, seeing infinity in a grain of sand, and eternity in an hour. And the reflective moment in the raindrop, somehow the mirror, if you like, becomes a window that we can... It's very like George Herbert, which I've heard Heaney quote, "A man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye. Or if he pleaseth, through it pass, and then the heavens aspire." And there's a throughness here. There's an invitation somehow for a moment to enter heaven. And I love the way that it's not just a one-off. It's just like, oh, I had this brief heavenly moment. It's reliable. It's available. Upend the stick again. What happens next is undiminished for having happened once, twice, 10, 1,000 times before. And in a way, I think that's also about poetry. There's a sense in which every poem is a bit like a rainstick. The words are just the grit and dry seeds. But every time we read it, we upend it again, and it flows through us, just like the grit and dry seeds strike the scales and make a music, which is the sound of rain. So the words of the poems fall down through us each time we upend a poem into ourselves, and reliably, undiminished, make that music again. What happens next is undiminished for having happened once, twice, 10, 1,000 times before. Old poems are just as freshly generative as new ones. And I've been upending the rainstick of this poem through my mind since it came out, and I bought it hot off the press in 1995, and now it's 2021 and it's still making its music. So maybe just for fun, I'll finish our visit just by reading the poem again, because the poem ends with the word again. So, the rainstick. Upend the rainstick, and what happens next is a music you never would have known to listen for. In a cactus stalk, downpour, sluice rush, spillage and backwash come flowing through. You stand there like a pipe being played by water. You shake it again lightly, and diminuendo runs through all its scales like a gutter stopping trickling. Now here comes a sprinkle of drops out of the freshened leaves, then subtle little wets off grass and daisies, then glitter drizzle, almost breaths of air. Upend the stick again. What happens next is undiminished for having happened once, twice, 10, 1,000 times before. Who cares if all the music that transpires is the fall of grit or dry seeds through a cactus? You are like a rich man entering heaven through the ear of a raindrop. Listen, now, again. Thanks for dropping by.